Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to On the Couch. This is a new thing I'm trying, where I'm interviewing not just mediums, anybody who'd like to come on and advertise themselves or just speak to me. And it's all going to be live. And the reason you keep seeing me moving my hand is two little dogs running around who just want to keep playing with Daddy. But they've got to realise that Daddy's busy. And he's got a very special friend as his first guest. She is a good friend of mine. She gave me a break at the Arthur Findlay College. And she's been more than a friend. She's taught me, she's nurtured me, and she's hugged me when I've needed it. But she's been on several occasions. And as you can see from the screen, this wonderful friend and lady I'm talking about is Mrs. Libby Clark. Hi, Libby.
Hi, Martin.
It's lovely to
Good to see you.
Yeah. Thanks for being my first victim in this virtual world. And people that know you, Libby, know that your love of not just mediumship, but spiritualism is quite obvious. It's a passion of yours. And what I'd like to do is tell us a little bit about how you came into this.
It was really rather strange because I came into spiritualism at 16, and my dad had his own business at the time and it wasn't doing very well, and he was getting very stressed, and he started going to church, and he'd never ever been a church person.
Yes.
And then I discovered that it was a spiritualist church, and I thought that was hilarious because I thought everybody was going to be sitting in the dark, you know, waiting for the toffee crisp wrapper to come out of the light fitting. And so I was teasing him about it. But then over a period of about 6 weeks, he changed. He became much calmer, much more at peace with himself. Even though the business was still a struggle, he was okay. And he said, "Why don't you come with me?" Not a chance. I don't want to sit round a table with a group of little old ladies touching little fingers and is anybody there? And my dad said, "It's not like that at all. The lights, there's lots of flowers, people are nice, and for a drink in the pub after. If you come, I'll buy you a drink." I am such a cheap date, Martin. So I said, "Yeah, okay," and went along. Lots of preconceived ideas, no thoughts of it actually being a church and being a service. And when we got there, it was just so calm. Everything felt, the words I've always said is, it felt like I'd arrived home.
Yeah.
So that was it.
Yeah. A lot of spiritualists say that there's this feeling of coming home. And your experience reminds me very much of several mediums whose books I've read, where we are tempted to church by someone else. Let's go and see the spooks. And then when you get there, they're the fishermen, and then they stick their hook in. And once the spirit of God is, you know, they've got you. Which leads me on to my next question. And we hear from years ago how in the past you'd have to sit forever before being allowed to speak. How was it in your day? Did you have to sit for a long time before being allowed to speak?
Once I got into church and started going on a regular basis, I realised that a lot of the things that I had seen and heard and done as a child were actually spirit.
Yes.
And I got into trouble as a child because I would say things about people, and my mum didn't like it, so that was it. I was in bother. But for me, it was almost like a confirmation of things that had been going on in my head were confirmed, put together inside spiritualism. And I think that from my point of view, it was more about feeling that I'd actually got a place to belong at last.
Yeah. Could you tell us then, when you found that you'd got this gift and you were sitting, you said you've had it from childhood, and we spoke to each other, how many times, if we had £1 for every time we've spoke, we'd both be rich. But I knew that Gordon was a big inspiration in your life, and not just an inspiration. I mean Gordon Higginson, for those who are wondering who Gordon is, a wonderful medium. But you once spoke to me about a lady called Queenie Nixon, was it? A big inspiration. So there's two big characters of mediumship who were inspired you. How did they inspire you, and who else could you tell us about?
Just going back slightly to the previous question for a moment, that I was too young to get involved in anything in the church. Okay. They wouldn't let me do anything. So I used to pester, annoy, frustrate the mediums after the services and ask them questions, because in church they'd say to me, come back in 5 years. Well, I was 16, 21 when you're 16 is ancient. So I couldn't fit into church properly. So I used to bother the mediums. And I was so lucky, because the two young guys that ran the church, it was Beaconsfield Street Church at Nottingham.
Oh, yes.
Tiny little church. But the two guys that ran the church there used to book only good quality mediums. So even for a Sunday service, we would have Gordon Higginson, Glyn Edwards, Jean Bassett, Mavis Patilla, Robin Stevens. They were all quality mediums. And I'd say, could I just ask you a question? And Gordon and Glyn both took me under their wing. And I would ask a question and you'd see this come across their face again, and they'd answer me. But it was because, and I didn't know how to treat the spirit world in that sense. I'd had no training. So I talked to spirit like they were normal people.
Yes.
Like they were you and me.
I find that important that you say that you speak to the spirit world as people. And I know you and I have had this conversation before, where we say we've spoken to students, we tell them to go and speak to the spirit world. And you seem amazed that they can actually speak to the spirit world. And it always amazes me that people come into mediumship and think it's just about closing their eyes and hoping something pops into their head, rather than having that two-way communication.
I always say to them, it's a bit like with mediumship, it's rather like you pick up your phone and you phone somebody. But if you don't speak, after a few seconds, they kind of go, hello, 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 and put the phone down.
Yes.
If you just say hello back, you've opened that link to start that conversation going.
Yes.
And even if you don't know what to say, your presence with the spirit world is enough to begin to build that bridge.
Yes. So if we go back, you said you were 16 and the church wouldn't let you do anything with them, and you were pastoring people like Gordon and Mavis and Glyn, all well-known mediums. What sort of things did you do that would help newcomers? The way you were, before they let you go into the church, how were you developing them? You sitting at home? Or?
It really was a mixture of things, because on a Sunday night after church, we would all go to the pub. So a couple of the people that were there, the mediums kept telling me from the platform, you'll be a medium, you can do this, and I was like, yeah. And then I realised that sometimes when the medium was working, I could see the communicator.
Yeah.
And I would get frustrated, because it would be like, why isn't that person passing on the message from that spirit communicator?
Yeah.
Why aren't they saying all that person's saying? And I then started going to the open circle. So I learned that in open circle, I could have a go. But then we went to the pub on a Sunday. And people would give me things to hold, to do psychometry readings from.
Yeah.
Which I found I was quite good at. To the point where the landlady of the pub would come and sit and give me something of hers to hold, and I'd do her like a mini reading. And she used to make trays of sandwiches for our table so that we'd stay a bit longer.
Yes.
And it went from there, really. I would sit quietly and, if you like, talk in my head to spirit. Not asking who's there, but what am I supposed to be doing? How am I supposed to be doing this? And I never learned the ultra polite way of, dear spirit, I'm here, I'm waiting for your voice, come into my mind, bring peace. I never learned any of that because I was 16 and I would start the same as I do now. Are you there? I want to play.
Yeah, yeah.
Or if they came to me when I was busy, I'd say, go away, I'm not playing now. It wasn't a case of, oh, spirit must want me to listen, they must want me to hear. This is my life.
Yes.
And they work with me, they don't control me.
Yes.
And so for me, it was like having a normal relationship with somebody that I couldn't see.
Yes, yeah. As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, it's a dog. To show that it's warts enough, my little dog wants to come and join us. And just before we came on air, he came and sat right on my knee looking at Libby, because he knows Libby and he's been to Libby's house. And he can hear Libby's voice and he wants to say, there's Auntie Libby, let me have a look. So then you got to develop.
Where's Layla gone?
Yeah. Then you got to develop. He's laid down now. He's happy that he's with Daddy and Auntie Libby. You got to developing then. You realised you could have this gift. Can you remember the first church you served? I'd like to know how you got that service and did it go well?
That was really weird because by this time I was like 17 and a half. I was at college in Nottingham and a student, never got any money. And I couldn't afford the bus fare from where I lived to church as often as I wanted to go. So I knew there were other spiritualist churches around, but I'd never been to any of them. And I decided I would try one of the local ones. And I'm going to be honest, I was more scared going in there than I had been going to church for the first time.
Yes.
Because in my own church now, a year on, so people have got to know me, they'd talk to me. I would chair the services sometimes if they were struggling.
Yes.
And make the teas, clean the church, whatever. And so I went along to Kirkby in Ashfield. And again, it's a tiny little church. It probably only seats about 30 people. And I did what everybody does. I sat as close to the door as I could get with my back to the wall for this first visit, thinking, if I don't like it, if I feel uncomfortable, I can get out the door. And the medium, as they started, the medium came to me with a link and did the usual, I'd like to speak to you. So I did what everybody does and did this, realised I was sat with my back to the wall. And she said, yes, that young lady there. And the medium was a lady called Sonia. And she said, my guide's telling me, this was a Monday night, by the way.
Yeah.
My guide's telling me that you're going to take the service here next Monday. I'm sorry, I don't think so. I'm not a medium. She said, you are. And my guide's telling me. And students, and you will know, I hate it when people use that phrase.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why. Because she said, we'll come and talk to you after the service. So as the service ended, I went to stand up, and those two little old ladies were off that platform and up to the back of the church to me before I'd even got my bottom off the seat. Yeah. Now then, we start at 7 o'clock next Monday. You need to be here for 1:45, blah, blah. And I said, no, book somebody else because I won't be here. And she said, I'll be here next Monday. I went out of curiosity. I didn't get there till like 5 minutes before, thinking that I've sorted somebody else out and I won't have to do it. And she said, oh, we knew you were coming. Spirit told us. Okay. So they got me on the platform, and I remember going to a young lady, a young mum, with a little boy that was in spirit that had drowned. I mean, even now, that's a message that I would think twice about giving. But there it was. And I looked around, I've got all the church in tears. And then I'm talking to somebody about their mum and the silly things she used to do, and everybody's laughing. And I finished the service, and Sonia was there, and the chair lady, and she said, we knew you could do it. Have you got your diary? We'd like to book you again. And that was it. Yeah. And I kind of walked home in a bit of a, oh my God, what just happened? And probably for the next year, 18 months, I served Kirkby Church, maybe about once every 6 or 8 weeks.
Yes. Yeah.
And then another church rang and said, your name's been passed on to us by somebody that saw you at Kirkby. Can you come to Sutton? And then can you come to Mansfield? And slowly, I just started taking church services in my area, and it just took off from there.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember getting a phone call.
Sorry, go on. Sorry, I interrupted there.
That's okay. I remember getting a phone call, and at this stage, I'd be about 21, I suppose, 22. We got Sarah, and I put the phone down. I said to Bob, oh my God. He said, what? I went, I've been asked to go to Ripley Church. That's in Derbyshire. So, you know, it's 16 miles away, but it felt like such an achievement to be moved to a different area.
Yes.
So
I think we all get moments like that. And I can remember, I was talking to somebody about this the other night. The very first message I ever gave after I'd done all the fishing, you know, and I came into it when my father passed away, and it came instantly. I've told you many times, the spirit world was just there. People are calling it nowadays your spiritual awakening. But I remember sitting in a circle at Burslem Spiritualist Church. The circle was all ladies except me, and it was a little girl called Elizabeth who wanted to speak to her mum. I think it was, no, the lady was Elizabeth, their daughter was Jane. She wanted to speak to her mum, and she showed me that they'd got French windows, a little back. I can remember it just how you remember that first message. Yeah. This beautiful beach ball, you know, the coloured ones. And she wanted to tell her mummy that she loved her. Just tell mummy I love her. Well, I've just said it there in about a second. It took me about 3 minutes to say, well, you know me and my waterworks. She just wants to say. She just wants to say. Yeah. And by the time I'd finished, all the ladies in the circle streaming. By the time I said, she just wants to say, Mummy, I love you. Well, that was it. Everybody was gushing there. But it's amazing how if mediums look at the journeys, and I always say we should talk to each other more, not you and I, but mediums, because you learn so much from speaking to other mediums. And I think sometimes it's better than going to a course, because it gives you ideas where you can try. It's like having a soup and do I need more salt, more pepper, can I add something else? But although we've known each other now, I think it's about 10 years, I haven't seen you demonstrate that many times. Most of my experience with you, Libby, has been with your trance mediumship, of which I'm a great admirer. So I'd like to, we've seen how you develop now and going to the church. So I'd like to now move on to, when did the trance start developing? The trance mediumship, I should say.
Okay, well, that's Gordon's fault, because Gordon kept saying to me, you'll be a trance medium, you know. Now, I'd seen Gordon in trance quite a few times.
Yes.
And watched him working, and same with Glyn, same with Jean. I mean, I sat on the hearth at the side of Gordon's chair at a friend's house, and Gordon said, shall we see if the spirit have got anything to say to us tonight? And I was literally sat on the floor at his feet. And he said to me, you will be a trance medium. And I said, no, I won't. And he said, it's not a choice.
Yeah.
So for a long time, I kind of held it off. And then I never stopped sitting to develop my mediumship, but I would sit on my own and ask questions and ask for explanations. How can I do this better? How can I change that? So I became aware of a Welsh voice in my head. And that particular helper that came along, who got nicknamed Taffy from sitting because she's Welsh, really she was the ground, she was the rock that all my trance mediumship was developed on, because she started by talking to me more. She would come, I didn't like it because I felt like I was losing control.
Yeah.
Whatever I was in was not
We keep breaking up, so if I keep stopping.
Screen's frozen here. Yours.
Yeah.
Is your screen frozen?
No, mine isn't. No, but yours keeps freezing.
Right. Okay.
We'll see how it goes.
All right. So yet again, I was back at Kirkby Church, and the guy that was the president then, a guy called Bill Storer, been in spirit a long time now, he said to me, oh, I do love it, Libby, when you come to do the service here on a Sunday. He said, I love your philosophy, I like your clairvoyance. And I said, nah, my clairvoyance is fine, but I wish my philosophy had a bit more oomph to it. It's a bit wishy-washy. And he said, no, I like it. So started the service. The next thing I know, I'm standing on my feet, and I know I've got the first link there for messages.
Yeah.
And I know I've said something for the philosophy, but I can't remember any of it. And as I look across, Bob sat at the back, like, wondering what on earth happened. So did the messages, finished the service. Immediately, kind of, what happened? And Bill said, I don't know who that Welsh lady is, Libby, that did your philosophy, but she's absolutely wonderful. And Bob then got from the back of the church to him, and he went, Taffy did your philosophy. And I said, if you ever do that again, I'm going to stop working.
Yeah.
And she said, no, you'll just do more of it. And she was the one that sort of led me into the trance side of it, because she was very down to earth, very normal.
Yes.
She wouldn't talk to me about archangels and fairies and earth and this. There was none of the silliness that can get involved in it. It was, I work with you, I want to share knowledge, you're going to tell them what I'm saying.
Yeah, lovely.
And that was it.
Yeah. Now, I think anybody that knows you, shall I call him your most famous guide? Or the guide that they all like to see, and who I've chaired for you when he's been with you, is Dr. James. And he's given some wonderful healings. He's given some wonderful lectures and talks. How did this relationship grow with Dr. James?
By the time I was about 25, I'd already been told that, look, trance is the way that you're going to go, whether you like it or not. So I was approached by someone that we knew very well, Max. We'd met him at church, Max Parker, and his wife Shirley. And they said, had I thought about having a circle for trance? And they knew Violet Edwards, and I knew Violet from church. Yeah. She was a minister within the SNU. And Violet said, yes. You should. Gordon said it to everybody. So why don't Shirley and I come and we'll sit for you? So we put the girls to bed on a, can't remember what night it was now, it doesn't really matter. Put my two girls to bed, who were still very young, and then the four of us would sit. And we'd sit for maybe an hour and a half. Initially, it was my Welsh lady, it was Taffy that came.
Yes.
And then Max had a major problem with psoriasis. And it had gone ballistic. It was really, really bad.
Yeah.
And so I came back this particular night from the circle, not sitting in my chair in the corner where I'd always been, but sitting to my dining room table. And on my dining room table, lying on a quilt with just his trousers and vest t-shirt on, was Max. And it was like, what happened here? And apparently Dr. James had stepped in and said that he needed to work on Max because this psoriasis was really getting to a dangerous point. And he said, but you need to be lying down for this. So get the quilt, Robert. So we sent Bob to get the quilt off the bed, folded it in three, lay Max on it, and then slid him round the table to get to the bits of him that he wanted to. And then when I came back, it was like, where am I? Yeah. And that carried on probably for about a year off and on. And Dr. James would talk to them, he would teach them about healing, he would talk about different approaches to it, different ways of doing it. And it all just took off from there, really. But in the early days, he couldn't stand up. He didn't move like he does now.
Yeah, yeah.
He would walk to the dining room table and then he would say, chair boy, chair. And Bob would have to get a chair underneath before he sat down.
Yes, yeah.
And he didn't move. He moved the patient. And as you know now, he just walks around the patient. Yeah, yes. He moves very easily.
It's a wonderful experience to see, actually. And it's a lovely, I remember chatting for you on several occasions, and there's a lovely feeling when he comes. It's such a strong energy, you just feel him filling the space, so to speak. When I mean filling the space, I mean wherever he's demonstrating, he fills the space. And that's obviously a very special relationship. And do you work with other guides? I mean, I know you do, but I'd like to talk about the other guides, because I've been doing some demonstrations recently, and people are surprised that, say, Arthur will come first, then he'll have a say, he'll speak, and he'll allow someone else to come. And they say, do we have more than one guide? Well, my opinion is yes. So I would like your opinion.
You've told me.
We're frozen again.
If we go to the well,
yeah,
on you, Martin, it's froze on me this end. Okay. If I go back to the Welsh lady, she was the first person that ever spoke through me. And she said that there would be other people and they would come for a little while and then move on as they taught me or trained me, as I was going to say, into how they wanted me to work. Yeah. So there was a helper called John, Now this, you have to remember, I gave him the name of John because it's John Doe. I didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
And he would talk to me, and he would walk and talk to me. So in my head, it was like going on a walk with him somewhere. And the last time that I saw him, we were walking along one of these big boulder beaches, you know, where it's rocks, not sand. And I can't keep up with him. He's just walking and I'm moving, can't stand on my feet, slipping off pebbles and rocks. And I said to him, wait for me. You're going too fast. And instantly he was back with me and he said, you know your problem, don't you? So remember how old I am. I'm still only maybe like 22, 23. And I went, no, what? He said, you're walking with your feet. Well, what else am I supposed to walk with? And he just smiled at me and he said, your mind.
Yeah,
and it was then I could keep up with him. And he said, I've done my job now, I'm going.
Yeah, good.
So he went. Dr. James started coming through in the circle, but then Michael came one night. Bob and I were sitting on our own. I'm trying to think now when that would have been. We were at the bungalow, so maybe 35 years ago. And the person that would normally come, Taffy, didn't come. And Bob was just sitting and we recorded it. And this man's voice came and he said, good evening. So Bob said, good evening. And then he said, I wish to converse with you upon the fundamental aspects of mankind's inhumanity to man. And on the tape you heard Bob go, what? So he repeated it and Bob went, sorry? I don't understand. And that was Michael's first visit.
His introduction.
And at that point, he apologised to Bob for the fact that his language wasn't easily understood, or his vocabulary wasn't easily understood. And he said he'd go away and come back when he thought he would be more acceptable. And he was away for 3 years. And then 3 years later, in the circle, Max and Shirley there, good evening, you may remember me. I am the person who wanted to speak with you upon the fundamental aspects of it. And Bob said, I know who you are. So Michael does a lot of the philosophy, quite a lot of intense, I suppose, focusing mainly on philosophy, but quite a lot of intense science stuff as well. Because he likes to research, he likes to investigate.
Yeah.
So the things like neutrinos and different healing abilities, he works with Dr. James.
Yeah.
And they make a good team.
Good. You work extensively overseas when we're not in lockdown as we are now, in lots of countries, at the Arthur Findlay College and places like that. What sort of effect does that have on your family life?
It can be very difficult because I was a working medium and I had a full-time career before I had the children, before I had the girls.
Yeah.
So the one thing that I used to say to churches is, yes, I can come and you can book me, but whatever my travelling expenses are, there's £3 extra that I have to charge because that's my babysitter. And the majority of churches were absolutely great with it because they just, that's no problem, we can do that. So we would leave the girls at home and Bob would drive me and we'd go to do a service all over the country.
Yeah.
Then it got that the girls were at school, so it became more difficult because they needed to be sort of home in bed. They couldn't come with us on a Sunday night, which they had done in the past. And it was really hard. The first time I worked at the college, my girls were on half term from school. And in fact, I found the letter yesterday. I was clearing out some drawers here, and I found the little bundle of letters that I've saved, because I wrote a letter for them both every day with things they could do, places they could go. I hid stuff around the house for them to find while I was away. And I drove off the drive that Saturday morning to head down to the college. And I ended up pulling up about half a mile up the road and sobbing, because I could not, I wanted so much to go to the college to work for Spirit, but I hated leaving Bob and the girls.
Yeah, yeah.
And for a difficult thing to do. But never known me any different. That's what I'd always done.
Yeah, yeah.
When I met Bob and he asked, could he take me out for a drink? I said, well, you can, but I'm taking a church service that night. So you can either take me there and wait in the car park, or take me there and come in with me. I didn't even give him the choice of picking me up afterwards.
Yeah.
So
with no choice.
No. But it is hard. And it's difficult. Family events. The girls come, Mum, I'm having a baby. And we are so excited. And then in the back of your mind, there's, where am I going to be in 7.5 months' time?
Yeah, yeah.
What have I got to change? Because we are booked 2 years in front.
Yeah.
Family weddings and funerals, special occasions like that. I wouldn't book around the girls' birthdays. I wouldn't go away then. Or like Easter, when the girls were off school, I tried to be home. It's not always possible.
No.
And I think that's one of the hardest things as a mum, coming to terms with the fact that I'm not always here when I'm needed.
Yeah. So we're getting near the end now, but before we go, I'm sure, hopefully, there's going to be a lot of people who are starting off on the pathway, want to start on the pathway. What one piece of advice would you give to budding mediums that want this glamorous lifestyle of ours?
Yeah, it's really glamorous having to get up at 3 a.m, to drive for 2.5 hours to an airport, to sit for 3 hours and board a plane and sit for another few hours. Why is that glamorous?
Yeah.
There's only so much shopping you can do in an airport. One piece of advice: stay honest. Be honest.
Yeah.
If it's not Spirit, say so.
Yes.
Don't force it. Don't try and make it something it's not.
No.
If you're sitting to move into an altered state of consciousness and nothing happens, tell them nothing's happening. Don't sit there and all of a sudden blink, you become your Chinese guide or whatever, because that's doing you a disservice and it's doing Spirit a disservice.
Yeah.
It's not working. There's a reason for it.
Yeah.
Just one quick story about how that worked for me. I was taking a service at a church in Hinckley in Leicestershire years ago, and the church had one of those suspended ceilings on the polystyrene tiles on the metal framework. I'd gone there first time at that church to do a trance dem. Sat on the platform, 80 people had already bought the tickets and sitting there looking at me, and I could not get into an altered state. Every time I tried to step towards that, Spirit said, no. And it's like, what? Come on. No. So the lady that was cheering for me said, oh, well, we'll sing a hymn. So they sang a hymn, still couldn't settle into the energy. And I said, look, I'm going to give it one more try. Now we're about 15, 20 minutes in. I said, I'm going to give it one more try. And if I can't, then I can either do a demonstration for you, or we can do questions and answers, however you want to follow on. said, oh yeah, that's fine, that's fine. So I closed my eyes and again went back to spirit and heard this weird noise and then like a crash from the back of the church. And unbeknown to the church, the back corner, they'd had a leak in the roof above it.
Yes.
And it had worn all this tile and everything away. And it all crashed through into the church at the back third of this suspended ceiling. At which point Spirit said, we're ready now.
Wonderful.
And it's like bits of dust and stuff floating everywhere and people coughing and jumping out the seats.
Yeah.
So
Intelligence of spirit.
you learn to trust them. Be honest.
Thank you, Libby.
It doesn't cost you anything, but it might just save your reputation.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure interviewing. Someone of my classes, one of my best friends. As I said at the beginning, you gave me my break at the Arthur Findlay College, and we've become firm friends since then. You've helped me through thick and thin, and I can't thank you enough for being my first guest here on the couch. Thank you very much.